So, this is my first upload on YouTube. Here goes nothing. It's going to be pretty free form because I just wanted to get something out there on the site rather than just sit around and wonder what kind of video I should make and overthink it and overplan it and ultimately make nothing, spend hours typing up a Word document for a script that doesn't become a video. So I'm just going to record free form, say my thoughts and feelings as they come, and hope that will imbue me with a little bit more, I don't know what the word for it, it will light a fire under my ass to actually upload this video on the site and not just pussyfoot around. Okay, so I want to talk about this book, The Culture of Narcissism, but more so this author, Christopher Lasch. He's somebody who I have read before. I just got this book, but I've read one of his other books before. I believe it's called The Revolt of the Elites. And it was a real eye-opening experience for me because I believe that he's a guy, he died in like 1995, but he wrote a series of books about the decay of American liberalism and how that was impacting American society and politics and so on and so forth. And what he wrote back in the 90s, 80s, 70s, and 60s, because he wrote from the 60s until he died, pretty accurately laid out how things would develop in the United States. Like, what I mean by that is he pretty accurately predicted a series of problems that would arise in the United States that I personally feel like are responsible for Donald Trump and the national populist far-right movement that we've seen in the United States since 2016, or maybe even earlier. And so I'm not the first person to point that out. Christopher Lasch was name-dropped a couple of times in the past, in 2016 especially. People were talking about him quite a bit. There were quite a few people who were familiar with him and his work. And when Trump was rising in popularity, there were quite a few people saying like, "Oh, is this a Christopher Lasch moment? Is this what Christopher Lasch was talking about?" So basically, there's a lot of things Christopher Lasch talks about, but he's somebody who styles himself as a leftist. I think he even identifies as a Marxist, and he criticizes the American left, but very specifically the professional managerial class within the American left. So that is people with a college degree, people who have white-collar jobs. I mean, it's in the name, professional managerial, professionals and managers. People who typically would live in like a city in the U.S. along in the coasts. They would have upper middle income, maybe middle income, middle class income, and I hope I'm using that correctly. And these people, the political behavior of these people and the consumption behavior of these people and how it impacts American society and how it is basically laying the groundwork for a populist backlash. I've read a lot in recent years about how globalization, how its impact on the United States was not unlike, the Industrial Revolution or colonization on the rest of the world, in that it was this extremely consequential historical event that transformed the society upon which it happened. And in the case of globalization, in the case of the U.S. in the later 20th century and early 21st century, that transformation was that it robbed a working class people from middle America of their means of production, sent it overseas to Asia most famously, but also to other countries. Mexico is also a place that received a lot of American factories more recently, I think. It's not important. And also brought in a new workforce in the form of migrant labor that is cheaper and willing to do the work of the American worker for less. And how basically the so-called left, that is supposed to be the party of the worker, that's supposed to be the party of the working class, actually sold the working class out and then acted like it was acting in its favor. I don't know if many of you who would watch, if anybody's watching this at all, which I hope one or two people at least, who grew up listening to political talking points that said things like offshoring is not going to get rid of American jobs. It's going to bring new jobs, better jobs that are going to replace all the crappy jobs that are getting rid of all these factory jobs that nobody even wants anyway. That didn't happen. The new jobs brought as a consequence of America connecting more to the global market and sending more of its industries overseas. The new jobs that were created were in things like retail, Walmart, Best Buy, Home Depot, not necessarily paying better. Definitely not. Usually not being able to afford the same lifestyle for somebody without a college degree that a factory would have been able to afford them. A factory job would have been able to afford them, especially not a unionized one. So I think that this is a phenomenon that defines the late 20th and early 21st centuries, is left liberal elites betraying the working class, but pretending like they're not. Politics today, political discourse today, is dominated by talking heads, by think tanks, by people who tell you how to feel about the facts. And I think that this video is not meant to be sympathetic to the Republican Party or to the right wing at all, but I think it is fair to say that left liberal progressive talking heads and think tanks have distorted the facts for a long time when it comes to the bad implications of globalization. About like immigration, for example. Immigration is a net positive for everybody, no matter what. Full stop. That's not true. That's not true. If you think that that's true, I would encourage you to look at the world of anti-immigrant movements that are echoing the same talking points. It's not just the U.S. having a Donald Trump moment. All of Europe as well, and also countries in Latin America, countries in the global South. Immigration is a global issue. Part of it because of climate change, part of it because of increased conflicts. But a big reason is that immigrants know a lot of the time that if there's a neighboring country where they can work for cheaper than the local population, that they will be preferenced for work. It's just logical. And if that's done on a large enough scale, it displaces workers. And it is anti-working class to say, well, let's maintain that influx of cheap labor at any costs, and let's moralize it and present it to the population as if it is this moral imperative because of historical grievances, because of, to make up for colonization, that sort of pulls on the white guilt thread in the head of a lot of Westerners, I think. Or it's, they lie with statistics. They'll use some government white paper or think tank report to say, well, if you look at this document, and you look at this analysis of immigrant labor, and you carry the one, and you count all your you cross all your T's and dot all your I's, and they flood the layman reader with this like technical jargon that just makes their eyes gloss over, and they just spit out a bunch of math that may or may not be true, and it's sort of blocked behind this barrier of education that they have the ethos to transcend and understand, but the layman does not. They say, well, my paper says that I'm right. My professional expertise says that I'm right, and that immigration is good, and that you're just being ungrateful and racist and xenophobic, and nobody should take you seriously, and you should be exiled to the political extremes. You're a Nazi. Nowadays it's hard to tell who is a Nazi and who isn't, looking at American politics, but there was a time for sure when that name was being thrown around, maybe unfairly. So Christopher Lasch, going back to where I started with this, Christopher Lasch was a guy who wrote about these liberal tendencies in their infancy in the Western world. These tendencies to betray the working class, and he wrote about it from many different angles, but one that I've always had interest in, and that he touches on, but I don't think he goes that far in depth in, is the concept of the cosmopolitan. What the cosmopolitan is, to me, is a person who has grown up in the interconnected global world, and they are more globally connected than they are nationally connected. So they are somebody who has more in common with other cosmopolitans in other countries around the world than they have with their own people. Now, what is a cosmopolitan? Like I said, it's somebody who's connected to the global world, but it implies a sort of eliteness to it too, right? It's somebody who has an education. It's somebody who has some money. Education these days is a sign of money. You can't afford an education without some money, right? It's a means of climbing the socioeconomic ladder as well. So education is an investment, and it's a sign of wealth, and it's an investment for future wealth, right? So it's something that's typically held by middle and upper class people, not by lower class. And when I mean education, I mean post-secondary, like college, an associate's, bachelor's, master's, etc. So cosmopolitans tend to have that, as well as having a global perspective, probably combined with the fact that they're maybe multicultural. They have one or both parents from somewhere else who maybe came to the country in which they're living in the West on a professional visa, something like an H-1B, hence their wealth. They're not somebody whose parents came to the United States to work as a fry cook or as a taxi driver necessarily. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but trying to say that these are immigrants or people with a global background and more multicultural background, but not necessarily poor. Does that make any sense? Somebody who is more international than national. Let's say that. Defined more by an international background than by a national background. Also, probably, another point, raised on the internet. Now, there's a lot of people nowadays who would say that they're raised on the internet. They spent more time on the internet growing up than with their family and friends. So that connects you to the world as well. But the point here, I'm kind of losing my thought here, but most human beings, for most of human history, have been enculturated by their own culture. They were raised by the people in their immediate vicinity, and therefore imbued with the ideas of their local culture, of their city, of their village, of their country, of their ethnic group. It's a first in history now that because of the interconnected world and because of the internet and because of these things that we have as a result of global capitalism or neoliberalism or the globalist world order, if you want to call it that, it's only because of that we have people now who are enculturated more by the globe than by their national culture. Those, I would say, are cosmopolitans. And those people are disconnected from the countries in which they grow up in often. And they go on because of their privileged access to education, and because they, like I said, tend to be from middle to upper class, not necessarily the 1%, but wealthier than average, or on the wealthier side of population. they tend to grow up to have quite a bit of influence in society. So what I'm saying is that in the 21st century, a lot of Western countries have a lot of cosmopolitans running newspapers, running universities, running the television shows, and they have a cosmopolitan perspective. They don't have the perspective of the everyman, the layman, the proletariat of that country. They are intelligentsia. They are global intelligentsia, right? And I think that that's where a lot of this frustration comes from. I think that a lot of this right-wing backlash nowadays across the world, not just in the US, again, in Europe, but also in India with Modi and the Hindu nationalists, or in Brazil with Bolsonaro. It's a global phenomenon, national populism. I think it is a backlash to out-of-touch, cosmopolitan, left liberal, white-collar job having, college education having elites who don't understand the people that they're governing. And we've gotten to a point where those people have felt so misunderstood and so betrayed and so lied to that they are accepting the words of con men over their elites, because their elites, they see them as con men too. Trump is a con man, in my opinion. I don't think he really believes in anything. I think he's just willing to do or say whatever it is he thinks will make him popular and make him be well liked. So with that in mind, he's tapped into a certain right-wing rage by railing against those people I talked about in the exact language that his base prefers. But I don't know if he actually, I don't think that he has zero beliefs. I'm sure like what he believes is probably on the conservative side, but I think he hams it up for his base, for sure. And he has kind of been led down the path of believing what they believe so that he can better embody the thoughts and ideas that will make him more popular. So, but that implies that the people who believe in him and support him already were outraged, and they already were angry and hateful towards the cosmopolitans, towards the left liberal progressive elites. And understanding why, I think, is key to understanding how we move forward out of this time, because this can't be our forever. This constant Weimar Germany style society, this like far left and far right bouncing off of each other forever. Do you really want to live this way forever? Constantly seeing like politically related news that would have been front paper news 10 years ago, but on like a daily basis? No. We need to return to normalcy. We need to return to stability. We also need to, I think, rescue and save a lot of Americans living in destitution and poverty. Give them opportunities. Give them chances for advancement. We're living in a crisis period, and Trump is emblematic of that, in my opinion. And I'm not saying that the far left is any better, but I think that working through this period and getting out of it starts with understanding what started it and what was its root cause. And I don't think it's capitalism and decay. I don't think it's it's some woke communist revolution or anything like that. I think it is a detachment from working American society and thinking American society, I guess you could say. The people whose job it is to interpret and manipulate data and information and push pencils versus those whose job it is to make and build things. And blue collar versus white collar. That's the disconnect, in my opinion. And so I'm anxious to hear what people think about that. and how that relationship can be mended, and what others think about what I've said about. I'm sure a lot of people don't agree that cosmopolitanism is to blame for the rise of Trump, and I'd like to hear why. So thank you for listening to my little lecture here, and I hope you enjoyed it.